Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of our special podcast. I am so excited to have you here. Today, we are going to go on a big adventure, not in the real world, but in the world of stories. We are going to talk about how myths and stories from long ago help us think about what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, and how these stories help shape who we are and what we believe in today. This might sound like a big topic, but don't worry. I am going to talk to you in a way that is easy to understand and fun to listen to, whether you are young or grown up. Let's start by thinking about stories in general. Have you ever wondered why people tell stories? Not just made-up stories for fun, but stories that are passed down from parent to child, from grandparent to grandchild? Some stories are very old, much older than your school, your town, even your country. These special stories are called myths or legends. People thousands of years ago made up these stories to explain things they did not understand, like thunder and lightning, the sun and the moon, what makes people brave or kind or clever, or how the world came to be. Now, you might ask, why are these old stories important for us today? Aren't they just fairy tales? But if you look a bit closer, you will see that myths are like invisible threads that connect the past with the present. They help us understand what people long ago thought was important, and often, they teach lessons that still matter today. Let me tell you a myth to start with. This one is from ancient Greece. There once was a man called Icarus. He and his father, Daedalus, were trapped in a high tower. They wanted to escape, but they could not go down because there were guards, and they could not go through the door because it was locked. Daedalus was very smart, so he made wings for himself and for Icarus out of feathers and wax. He told Icarus, "Don't fly too high or the sun will melt the wax, and don't fly too low or the sea water will make your wings heavy." But when they flew away, Icarus felt so happy and free that he forgot his father's words. He flew higher and higher, closer and closer to the sun. The sun melted the wax, and his wings fell apart. Icarus fell into the sea. Many parents use this story to teach their children a lesson: listen to advice, and do not let excitement make you forget about danger. Even today, people sometimes use the Icarus story to talk about someone who ignores warnings and gets into trouble. Did you notice something? This story is not just about flying. It is about being careful, about listening to people who know more, and about balancing your dreams with wisdom. Now let's think, do any stories like that exist in the place where you live? Maybe you have heard stories from your family, or from your school, about kids who got into trouble because they didn't listen, or about people who did something brave. These stories help us think about what is important in life. Every culture has its own myths and stories. In some places, people tell stories about animals who can talk, like trickster rabbits or clever foxes. In other places, there are heroes with magical powers, or monsters who teach people to be brave. There are many different stories, but if you look closely, you will often see similar lessons inside them. These lessons are called values. What are values? Values are the things we believe are important. For example, honesty is a value. So is kindness. So is bravery. Values are sometimes like invisible maps that show us how to behave, even when things are hard. Let's take another story, this time from Japan. There is a tale of a boy called Momotaro, or the Peach Boy. He was found inside a giant peach by an old couple who had no children. They raised him as their own. One day, Momotaro heard about mean ogres, or oni, who were stealing things from the people. He decided to go and stop them. On his way, he made friends with a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant. Together, they worked as a team to trick the ogres and win back the people's treasure. What can we learn from this story? We see the value of working together, of courage, and of helping others. This story is not just fun to hear. It is also a way to remind people, especially children, that being brave and being a good friend are important. But why do stories work so well for teaching these lessons? Maybe you have noticed that it is much more fun to hear a story about Momotaro and his friends than to just be told, "You should be brave and help others." Stories show us, instead of just telling us, what values look like in action. There is something magical about stories. When you hear a story, you imagine it in your head. You see the characters, you feel their fears and hopes, you wonder what will happen next. This helps people remember the lessons better. That is why, thousands of years ago, before most people could even read or write, they shared important ideas by telling stories. Let us think about another old story, this time from ancient Egypt. There is a myth about a god named Osiris. Long ago, Osiris was a wise king who ruled with kindness and justice. But his brother, Set, was jealous. Set tricked Osiris and took his throne. Osiris's wife, Isis, loved him and did everything she could to protect him and bring him back. This myth was very important to the Egyptians. It taught them about justice, about family love, about what happens when people do the wrong thing, and about hope, even when things go badly. Do you see how even in a story from so far away and so long ago, people were using stories to think about what makes a good person or a good ruler? These are questions that we still think about today. Now, let's take a journey to the continent of Africa. There are many different countries and languages in Africa, and thousands of stories, but one kind of story is very popular. These are the stories of Anansi the spider. Anansi is tricky and clever. Sometimes he makes mischief and sometimes he helps others. In one story, Anansi wants to own all of the world's wisdom. He puts it in a pot and tries to hide it at the top of a tall tree, but while he is climbing, he drops the pot and all the wisdom falls out for everyone to share. From this story, we can see the value of sharing, and also a gentle reminder not to be too greedy or think you can own everything. Anyone, big or small, can learn from Anansi's adventures. In schools and homes, people tell these stories to make lessons more interesting. Some of you might be thinking, is this just for children? Are myths only for kids? The truth is, stories are for everyone. Grown-ups also love stories, sometimes in the form of movies or books, or when sharing memories with family. In fact, many movies and books today are retellings of old myths, stories about heroes and adventures. Let's talk about superheroes. Many heroes you know, like Superman, Spider-Man, or Wonder Woman, are inspired by old myths. Think about it, these heroes often have special powers. They fight against evil, they want to protect people, they sometimes make mistakes, and they have to learn important lessons. This is not so different from the old myths. In a way, modern superheroes are just new kinds of mythic heroes for today. You might ask, why do we need heroes and stories about them? Heroes help show us what we can be at our best. They are not perfect, but they try their best to do what is right. When you read about a hero, you might feel inspired to help someone, to stand up against something unfair, or to keep trying even when things are hard. Sometimes, myths and stories also help people ask big questions. What is good? What is true? What does it mean to be a friend? If you think about it, some of the biggest questions in life do not have simple answers, but stories can help us think about them. Let's try a little game. I want you to imagine a time when you had to make a choice. Maybe you saw someone at school who was left out or sad. Did you decide to go and talk to them? Did you offer to play with them? Or maybe you were scared to do something, but you tried anyway. Can you think of a story that is a little bit like what happened to you? Maybe the story of a brave hero, or someone who learns to help others? When we see ourselves in stories, it helps us feel less alone. We understand that people everywhere, in all times and places, face the same kinds of challenges. That is one way that myths connect us, no matter where we are from. Stories can also help whole societies agree on what is important. Imagine a country where everyone tells stories about honesty and courage. People start to believe those are the most important values. They try to be honest themselves. They hope their leaders will also be honest and courageous. If a different country tells lots of stories about cleverness, or teamwork, or kindness, those values grow stronger there, too. That is why people sometimes say that stories shape values. This does not mean that stories are the only thing that teaches values, but they are a powerful way to do it. When we repeat a story again and again, its message sinks deep into our minds and hearts. Now, let's look at another kind of story. Sometimes, myths help people explain things in the world around them. Long ago, people wanted to know why it rained, or why the sun set at night. Since they did not have science like we do now, they made up stories. For example, Native American tribes sometimes tell stories about how different animals got their colors, or why the bear sleeps in the winter. These stories are fun, but they also teach respect for nature. They remind people to care for the plants and animals around them. You can see, then, that even though science explains these things now, the values in the old stories are still important. Taking care of the earth is as important today as it was long ago. In some places, people have stories about fire. In Australia, Aboriginal peoples tell stories about how people first got fire, or how the sun was made. These myths teach not just about fire, but about sharing, about taking care of precious things, and about working together. A story can start from something simple, like fire, but grow into a lesson about life. Let's talk about honesty for a moment. Many cultures have stories about what happens when people lie. Sometimes, the liar is a wolf, sometimes a person, sometimes a magical creature. In the famous story of the boy who cried wolf, a boy lies many times and says that a wolf is coming, but when it really does come, nobody believes him. This story teaches us that if we lie too much, people might not believe us when we really need help. Maybe you have heard this story from your parents or teachers. Maybe you have even remembered it yourself when you wanted to tell a fib. Stories stay in our minds and help us make choices. Now, some stories are very old, but new stories can also teach values. You and your friends can make up your own stories about kindness, teamwork, or facing fears. If you turn your own experience into a story, maybe someone else will remember it and learn from it, too. Let's take a moment to think about how stories change over time. Sometimes, new characters are added, or things are left out, or the lesson feels different. This is because society also changes. For example, hundreds of years ago, some fairy tales were much scarier than today. People changed them to make them friendlier, or to teach different lessons for different times. Even though stories change, the way they help us think about values stays the same. In a way, stories are alive, growing and changing as the world changes. Have you ever seen a movie with a message at the end? Or maybe your favorite cartoon character learns a lesson in each episode? This is another way that modern society keeps telling stories to help us understand what is right and wrong, what to do and what not to do. It is not only children who learn from stories. Think about adults who love to read novels, or to watch dramas on TV. Every time we hear about someone making a hard choice, or deciding to do the right thing even when it is difficult, it reminds us of what is important. Now, let's think about another question. If stories are powerful, can they also teach bad lessons? Sometimes, yes. If a story says that it is good to hurt others, or to take what you want without caring about others, that is not a good value. This is why it is important to think and ask questions about the stories we hear. Sometimes, people have to change old stories, or talk about why a lesson might not be right for today. For example, a long time ago, some stories said that only certain people could be heroes, or that some people were better than others. Now, we know that everyone is valuable, no matter where they are from or what they look like. That is why many new stories include heroes of all kinds. Stories can also help us imagine a better world. When we read or listen to stories about working together, being brave, or dreaming big dreams, we start to believe that those things are possible. Stories can give us hope when we feel sad or scared. They can help us see the good in ourselves and in others. Let's try to sum up some of the lessons we have learned. Myths and legends are old stories that people have told for thousands of years. They help us understand the world, explain things that are hard to see, and teach us what is important, our values. These stories travel through families, through countries, and through all time. They help connect us to people long ago and to each other. In modern society, we still love stories. We watch movies, we read books, we play games, and we share stories with our friends. Sometimes, the stories are about magical places, and sometimes they are about ordinary people who do amazing things. Each story has a lesson inside, if we look closely. Stories do not just come from books or from TV. They come from our families, from our communities, and even from our own imagination. Maybe you can think of a story from your own life, a time when you helped someone, learned a lesson, or became brave. Let's use our imagination together. Think about it, if you could make up your own myth to teach a value that is important to you, what would it be? Maybe you want to teach about kindness, so you invent a story about a gentle giant who helps the people in his village. Or maybe you want to show the value of forgiveness, so you write about a clever fox who learns to let go of old mistakes. Sharing your own stories is a way to help others learn from you, just as you learn from them. Maybe tonight, you can ask your family about the stories they heard when they were young. You might be surprised how many different kinds of stories there are, all teaching different lessons. Before we finish our episode, I want to leave you with a few questions to think about. Do you remember a story that helped you understand what is right and wrong? Did it make you feel strong, or brave, or kind? Can you find a story that helps you with a problem you have right now? And, most importantly, what kind of stories do you want to share with others? Stories are like seeds. When you plant them in someone's heart, they can grow into kindness, friendship, courage, or hope. The next time you listen to a myth, or read a fairy tale, or see a hero on TV, try to see what lesson is hiding inside. It might help you today, tomorrow, or many years from now. Thank you for coming on this adventure with me today, exploring the world of myths and stories, and thinking about how they shape our values in our lives. I hope you keep listening to stories and sharing your own, because you never know, your story might someday help someone else find their own path. Have a wonderful day, and keep wondering.